You're listening to the Actors Resource Podcast with Aaliyah Lay, a podcast for actors and improvisers with interviews from entertainment industry experts.
So today we have Catherine Campion, who is a lifer in the entertainment industry. She has been working as an actress nonstop since she was 16, first in theater, then commercials, followed by TV and feature films. Some favorite roles have been a foul-mouthed cancer patient on Weeds, fun, a Minnesota Iron Range mom standing up to Charlize Theron in North Country, and a nerdy gamer in Silver written by Diablo Cody. Now she works almost exclusively in voiceover. Highlights include TV campaigns for Subaru, United Health, Avita, and H&R Block, voicing Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow for the Iron Man video game, and Siri on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Amazing. She's now coaching the business of voiceover at the VO Dojo, a third-generation U.S. election judge, and serves on the board of directors for SAG-AFTRA Local, as well as Minnesota Women in Film and Television, of which she is vice president. Outside of the industry, she teaches adaptive yoga to students with disabilities and serves as a death midwife to those in the process of dying or losing someone dear to them. She lives in Minneapolis with her one true love, Jake, and one true dog, Dobby. Yeah. All right, Catherine, that is a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah,
that is a lot. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. How do you want to first share your story? Definitely want to touch on your death midwife duties as well, because that's something that I don't think a lot of people hear about. But we definitely want to hear about your success journey so far as a voiceover sensei, really.
Yeah. So I got started, like I say, at 16. I got my first paid professional acting job as an actress at a professional theater in Minneapolis. Got the bug, and I was a little smarty pants science whiz kid. So the idea of becoming a professional actress was just beneath me. People were like, "Wow, you're so good at this. You should be an actor." And I was like, "Oh, what a waste of my brain." And then I had a traumatic brain injury when I was 20, and I got more regular, and so I kind of became a better artist. And after about a decade of doing mostly theater, I started getting more into commercial because I wanted to pay the bills. And Minneapolis used to be a really good union commercial town. I've been in SAG-AFTRA for almost 25 years, and I was making a good living as a commercial actress on camera primarily. And then I got this little part in North Country, this really juicy little part opposite Charlize Theron. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to take a crack at Hollywood, I'll go out with this movie under my belt and I'll submit to some agents, and it probably won't go well. And I'll probably just go for 3 months and I'll quit, and then I'll come home. And then 3 months turned into 3 years, turned into 15 years, and I never had to get a day job. I've only had a day job for 2 years in my life, and that was so that I could buy my first property, because you need credit, savings, and stable income for 2 years, and I've never had stable income in my life. My income's all over the place. And so for 2 years, I managed a film marketing company, and I gave notice like the week that I signed the mortgage on my first property.
Cool. So that was a lot too. Do you prefer Kat or Catherine?
You can just say Kat. It's faster. I love them both. They're both kind of different aspects of me.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're gonna go down into that whole section there, right there. It was amazing and wonderful and great. So you got your role in North Country in Minnesota. Is that correct?
Yeah, they cast me. They were looking for Minnesotans because it took place in Minnesota. So I got to audition because I was in Minnesota. I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity if I were a Minnesota talent living in LA. And then it actually my scene shot in New Mexico. And then the scene that I had opposite Charlize Theron, by some twist of fate, was the scene they chose for her Academy Award nomination. So there I was, my first month living in LA, and I was on the Oscars. And my phone was blowing up, and I was like, oh, I don't watch the Oscars. I don't care about, talk about the definition of success. I don't care about awards and award ceremonies. So that was kind of a cool anecdote. And it did open some doors for me that I had no trouble getting on-camera representation because, in LA, there's always 3 movies that are billboarded all over town, and then it switches every few months. When I got there, it was like, oh, this North Country, this company called Participant Productions Productions that's never made a movie before, and then went on to make like all the best revolutionary, socio-politically active commentary on stuff. They're really successful now, and I think that was their first feature film. So that was like billboarded all over LA, and I was like, okay, yeah, I had the right idea. My instinct was like, get out to LA and start going, I'm in this movie, I'm kind of somebody, because there's a lot of people out there, so you got to stand out.
So when you first moved to LA, like, okay, so we're going to break this down even more. When you first, okay, so you were already talented as an actor, and you're a genius, certified genius, IQ level, right?
Certifiable.
Yeah. Certifiable genius. You didn't want to be an actor, right? Because you thought, because your brain, ginormous, right?
I didn't want to do it professionally. I worked as an actor throughout. I started college when I was like 15, and I was in school, and I was kind of partially paying my way through school with acting. So I liked that it could pay well. I did theater at some of the coolest top professional theater companies in a really cool theater town of Minneapolis. So I figured I'd always do it, but the idea of that being like my main focus or like the way I made money seemed like such a waste.
Right. So how did that change of mind happen for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, interestingly, rewind back like a decade. So in my 20s, I did do a year of grad school of international development at the Humphrey Institute at the University of Minnesota. My bachelor's degree is in agriculture, international sustainable agriculture, and I have a BS. So I was studying science. Meanwhile, I was being a theater actress the whole time. And my head injury was actually while I was in grad school, so I dropped out and never went back there. But I did try to move in the direction of international development. I have a big sister who's just, all my sisters are women of service, and they all make a living being in service, So like I have a sister who's a gambling addiction counselor. I have a sister who's a marriage and family counselor for specializing in like alternative modern types of that families that exist. And then my other sister is in international development. She owns and operates an international microfinance consultancy. I think that's what it is. And so I sort of thought I would like follow in her footsteps and be like this international development person helping people around the world. And I went to live in Mali, where she was the country director, and I kind of got a taste of like the inappropriateness for me as a middle-class white American woman to be like traveling around the world telling brown people how to develop because we know everything and maybe you should be more like us, and that's the last thing. If anything, they should be teaching us how to de-develop, to undevelop, so that we're not living at such a high level of planetary destruction. So I really woke up to that conundrum or fallacy or inappropriateness and decided I didn't want to go into development. So there was kind of between like 25 and 35, I was playing cello in bands, and I was still occasionally acting. But then, when I had the brain injury was when I was in grad school, when I was like 20. A friend of mine accidentally swung me around on the dance floor sort of and smashed my head against a desk, and it fractured my skull. And my understanding is I didn't get brain damage from the blunt trauma. I more got brain damage from my fever spiked to 103. And while I was in the hospital, they were like desperately trying to get my fever down because a bunch of fluid had accumulated on the back of my head, on my brain. So they had to like drain that, and they got my fever down. But the doctor did say, if you experience, mild but permanent brain damage, it's more likely because of the fever. And I do feel like my brain is way different. I was so clear up until that head injury. I was such a math whiz and science whiz, and everything was just effortless. And then it became like dirty dishwater. So I still have big thoughts, and I still understand. It's almost like the minutia. I don't get the minutia anymore. I don't get the specifics anymore, but that gives me a clearer view of the big picture because the soft focus on what's right in front of me. So my brain wasn't really wired to be a great math scientist whiz anymore. And then the acting, like my coaches and teachers and people I worked with in the industry at the time, they saw the change. When I healed and was able to get back into the world, they were like, whoa, here's what it is. I could see the gears going before, when actors are like in their head and they're thinking about the character instead of being it and feeling it. So I was given this beautiful gift of all of a sudden my brain was broken and I wasn't so smart. And all of a sudden it was so much easier for me to emote or just to act and just be rather than thinking about what would the character do and how would the character say this.
Wow. That I thank you so much for sharing that. And what I got out of that is your phenomenal attitude about this injury and how you appreciate the good that you got from it.
Well, what are the choices?
Well, you could choose opposite. Yeah, you could. You could, right? Nah. That's valid as well. That's a valid choice.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
It may not serve you as well, but it is still a valid choice.
Yeah, I'm greedy. I want to be served well by my life choices. So I think I decided a long time ago to go, well, let's make some great lemonade out of these lemons. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm really lucky, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have been when I grew up if I hadn't broken my head.
Who knows? I'm sure you would have been just as equally amazing in a different way. So,
Thank you. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Sure. I'll take that.
Yeah. So then from there, right, you got into, you were always a good actor before, but now something transformed within the acting itself. You were more being the character rather than thinking, right? Which is one of the banes of actors, right? Yeah. So, and then you got the North Country. I know we're just jumping all over the place,
sure,
but North
that's
Country.
How my brain works.
I love it. Yeah. And then, but you're still a genius. But then you moved to LA based on an intuition, on your instinct.
No, it was really like pragmatic. It was like, well, a Minnesota gal like myself is always looking for excuses to get the heck out of the tundra in the winter. So I was often wintering elsewhere. I had already done 3 winters in LA, mostly just like I didn't really care if I was successful or not. I just didn't want to be in Minnesota in the winter. And, and now here I am again because my parents are here. But so I knew, my brain really does make the connections. So it was so clear to me that if there was ever an opportunity for me, at this point, I'm like 35. You know how hard it is for a union actor with very few impressive credits to move out to LA and be like, I'm going to be a professional actress. It's just the odds are against you. And I thought, this is the one, this window, this door has opened and this is the opportunity. And, I don't know that I would have regretted not taking it, but I knew, I guess I figured better to, my mom really instilled that like better to take the risk and lose than not at all, or you're going to regret and you don't want to have regrets. So I just figured, like I said, I really assumed it would be a nice warm winter out there and then I would come back. And at some point I decided, well, I'll give it 3 years, which is a dumb thing for an actor. Like if you're really passionate about it and you really want to be it, then I guess just keep trying for your whole life. 3 years is a dumb period. But I also it wasn't that important to me. And I do attribute, I guess this is a little advice I'd like to give to people is if you can not attach so much to the results and care so much, like who gives a shit if you're an actress or you get an Academy Award or, the theory is that we really want to feel a certain way. We want to feel good. We want to feel happy. We want to feel successful. But there's loads of 6-7 figure earning talent that aren't at that place. So you got to, at some point you realize like, oh, it's not an external thing that I need to feel the way I want to feel. But I knew that like the whole time. So I never cared about whether I got cast or not. And it showed, like, especially for commercials, the casting directors are always like, did you just like roll in here all sweaty on your bike? And like, what, is there like a bald strip shaved across your head? It's kind of a punk hippie chick. And I didn't really play the game right. And a lot of the times that would work against me, but man, I would stand out and the casting directors would remember me. And so, they said I didn't like reek of the desperation that you often encounter at auditions when people are like, oh my God, this is the one that's going to change my life. I need this so badly. Like, I didn't care when I went and auditioned for North Country, knowing that it was a major movie and opposite Charlize Theron. But the role was really cool and juicy. And I just played with it and had fun with it and took some risks. And so, so it brought me out to LA and I took that opportunity and a friend of mine and I sat down in we printed out like 100 headshots and we did I learned about laser focus in LA and this was before I learned about laser focus. So I was throwing.
What's laser focus?
Well, as opposed to throwing spaghetti at the wall, like the best way to get an agent is like pick 3, do your research, find the agents that you want, find people that are connected there, get a referral or do a showcase. There's all these like there's all these targeted ways of being, but most people kind of just flail about throwing spaghetti at the wall, and that usually doesn't work. So that's what I did was I sent out 100 headshots and resumes, but I did handwrite on the outside envelope of all of them, now in North Country. And then when I got out there, I was like, oh, I'm glad I did that because everybody knows what North Country is. And then I put a resume, and I think I put a cover letter saying, here's my credits from Minnesota, and I'm moving out, and I'm in the union, and I'm moving out, and I'm looking for representation. So out of those 100 we sent out, I think I did have 7 responses and picked 3 or 4 agents to set up meetings with, and all but one of them was like, yeah, we'll take you on. So I moved out to LA basically already with a commercial agent, a theatrical agent, union status, a major motion picture, and a bunch of commercials under my belt. So that made it a lot easier.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's so great that you had all of that in place before you moved out. And that was just a really intelligent way to go about it. That's very cool.
Well, that leads me to some more advice that I give to people is if you're in a smaller market, don't feel compelled to leave it to go to go to LA. You might want to consider establishing yourself first in that market, whether it's to get your union status or earn some money or whatever. But, I'm really enjoying being a big fish in my smaller market here because I am back in Minneapolis now the past few years. So I don't necessarily encourage people to run off to LA to launch. I mean, it's great if you're already from there and based there and know the lay of the land. But I think, or if you're an attractive 17 to 21-year-old, apparently you want to strike while that iron is hot. But for just a theater actor, 25 to 65, maybe better just to try to get more credits in your local. And you can even submit these days, everything's virtual. You can certainly with a voiceover career, but even an on-camera career, you can submit so much remote. You don't really need to live in LA anymore,
Right. That one of the good things of the pandemic is that it did open up self-tapes, right? So a lot of people that were living in LA kind of moved out during the pandemic. Some people are still out, and some people are moving back because things are in general getting better. So yeah. So amazing, right? I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Now, you being you weren't just being different to be different. You were being you when you went into those commercials. You weren't desperate to get the job. You were just being you, and you were there.
Sure, yeah. Authenticity trumps gimmick. Let's put it that way.
Yes. I love that. Authenticity is so true because that's who we are, and that's what we bring that makes it different for each role, right? So from there, okay. You started auditioning because you already had a theatrical, you already had a commercial agent, you already had all of that, and you started auditioning. And how did that go? And how did you get into voiceover? Where did that transition happen?
Yeah, probably I spent about 5 years laser focused flailing about. I had a better business sense in my 30s than I did when I briefly lived in LA in my 20s. So I did some targeted, I did get some co-star roles, and I did get several commercials, and then I think about 5 years into it, I had kind of put it out there for years, oh man, voiceover, voiceover is like this division of acting, but it's a mystery. How does anyone get into that? So I'd ask, I remember one woman in particular, she's a Minneapolis voice talent. No, she's been in LA for forever, but she was originally from Minnesota. And I think she's a real working pro, mostly makes a living in voiceover. And I remember approaching her and being like, hey, how do you crack that nut? And she said, oh, it's really competitive. So, And I just was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I can't do that then. That's not really a cool answer for her to give me. And how lame of me to just take that as an answer of oh, well, I guess it's competitive. What isn't worth doing? What worth doing isn't competitive or challenging. So man, I think 5 or 6 years went by where I didn't even give it another thought.
Yeah.
And
Just to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be discouraging if somebody says that. And it's, of course, normal to hear that and go, oh, forget it. Yeah. So I definitely wanted to acknowledge that any choices, of course, that makes sense. And of course, also, you could have chosen differently at that time, but you didn't. And that's okay because because it's normal.
Well,
and it does sound discouraging.
And I'm glad that happened to me because I have woven that into the fabric of my coaching and teaching now, because I want to make sure people know, okay, this is a really, just like most careers, you got to spend a lot of money, you got to spend time, you got to train, you got to invest in a home studio, you got to, get your website and your demos. It's a lot of investment of time and money, just like any other legit industry. But then I say, but knowing that, do you still want to proceed? Where this message was sort of like, oh yeah, it's really hard. And it's like, yeah, but you were making a living at it. So I don't know if it's like a competitive, because that's not an attitude I hear much in VO as opposed to on camera, where people say, oh yeah, it's really competitive. And maybe in their head, they're thinking, it's really competitive and I can see how you would be my competition. So I'd rather not hold your hand through. I'd rather not help open doors for you, because why would I? You're my competition. I don't encounter that in the VO world. So it's interesting to me that was sort of my introduction to the VO world, because I've hardly seen anything like that since then. It is such a generous, open sharing. I've had so many people come to me and ask me like, how do I do this? And I used to just spend hours for free teaching and go like, oh yeah, I can help you do this. And nobody that got free mentoring from me, shall we say, ever launched a career. Like, I was like, well, why did I put hours into it? So I realized that if you had people invest a little, like I started going, well, why don't you take me out for lunch? Then at least, I said, well, normally my consultancy fee is $175 an hour, but take me out for lunch and I'll tell you what I know for an hour. And then I found that even that investment of time and money made people get a little more serious about like, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to take her out to lunch, then I better take her advice,
Yeah. It's so interesting. Us humans are so interesting. Sometimes we don't value, it's the same freaking information, but if it's given for free, sometimes we don't value it as much, which is silly, but also human, which is us, which is silly, right? Human is silly. And I feel like I'm so glad to hear that the voiceover section of the entertainment industry after your initial experience has been totally different. It's so great to hear. And I'm learning to come from a different way of thinking, which is that there is literally no competition, only with yourself. It's a different way of thinking. And I know that not a lot of people, the majority of people would maybe not agree with that kind of thinking. And I think that that's okay.
Well, there is a saying in LA about actors, there isn't a lot of competition. There are a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that better.
Yeah.
Back to you. So 5 years later, how did you get into it again? Like, what made you go, I'm going to go give it a try again?
Yeah, I don't recall what was my very first toe in the water, but a workshop of some kind. It very well might have been the VO Dojo, where I'm now loving coaching. So I just took like a weekend workout or something, and or maybe it was even like through them, but it was a casting director or something, probably a casting director who doesn't exist anymore, because most of the voiceover casting directors have gone the way of the dinosaur, because now it's all just going through ad agencies and agents and managers, and even like pay to plays and online sites and stuff. But I just did really, really well. And you know how it is when you perform and everyone's like, whoa, this your first time? Like, you should do this. You're really good at it. There was so much like positive feedback from the room, from the other students and from the casting directors, that I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I'm going to do this. And then I trained with a commercial coach for a few months and made a commercial demo. And while I was in the process of recording my demo with her, I booked a national spot that paid for all of my training and all of my demos, like up to that point. And that was like 3 months, from the time of deciding to do this professionally. Within 3 months, I was making a living at it, and I've never not made a living at it. And pretty much my income goes up every year because my network, one of the things I teach at the dojo is international. I teach mostly the business of voiceover, not as much as like coaching of performance. There's other people that are really good at teaching that, but I teach more like how to expand your networks and make more money at it. So I have clients all over the world, especially in Europe, who pays really well. And so every year I'm adding more clients to my roster, and most of them want to keep using me. So it's just like building, the foundation, and it just keeps growing and growing from there. So I'm working like every day right now. I'm pretty much booking a session almost every day. I did 48 political spots, SAG-AFTRA political spots last week for all like super lefty environmental health stuff that's very on brand for me and right up my alley. So,
woo! Congratulations! That is so awesome.
Yeah, and it's been a great summer.
When did you first start doing the voiceover, and how long have you been at it now? I think I missed that.
I'm going to say about 15 years. I feel like that's when I first trained and made my first demo. And then, and then I was with Abrams Artists out in LA, who are now called 3A or AAA or AAA. I don't know how they pronounce A3. I think it's A3. And they have a lot of podcasters now. That's a thing that is now being repped out in LA is like podcasters. So I think like 15 years ago.
Wow, that's crazy. That's so cool. And so after you took your initial training and while you were coaching for your commercial voiceover demo reel, you booked your first national commercial, which paid for everything.
Yeah.
15 years ago. And it's just been continuing to improve more and more over the course of the 15 years.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I don't know if that's the normal. I hear about like starts and stops and bad years and stuff, and it definitely comes in waves. Like I might go months without getting a booking, and right now I'm working more than I've ever worked in my life. But I like to think that this forward momentum will just lead to more. And then I kind of want to retire from it in a couple of years. I want to just keep the clients I've got and maybe audition less because, most of the gatekeeper work, like from agents and managers and casting directors, you still have to audition for. And I love that in Europe, almost everything is just given to you based on your past experience. They go, oh, we love all this that you've done, so I'm sure you can do that. Like, what an idea. Like, that's something only reserved for celebrities in the U.S., but that's kind of standard outside of the U.S. There's another thing I teach at the dojo is like how to get work without having to audition for every little thing.
Yes, that's awesome. Direct bookings. That's
direct bookings. Yeah, I get those all the time. Yeah, with clients. So I feel like I can soft retire in a couple of years where I'm not hustling. I'm loving the hustle right now, and I don't. Some people don't like that word, but I see it as like a dance move. I'm like hustle forward, hustle, hustle. Like I'm enjoying the hustle, which is like meeting people and making connections and getting more agents. I've got agents all over the world, and I'm on rosters all over the world, and I love auditioning. But I could see right now. I'm saying September, October, November, December, 16 months from now, I'm planning on like soft retiring and just whatever work is coming in, I'll keep doing it and I'll probably keep coaching because I love it, but I'm going to stop hustling.
Mm-hmm. And why is that, if you want to share?
I feel like I've done enough, and I feel like I will enjoy the hustle less in 16 months than I do now. There will be like a little burnout, I think. I just kind of see this path. But I could be wrong. I could be like, I still love the hustle, but I would like to spend a lot less time. I didn't become an actress to sit at my computer all day, and right now I am at my computer like 8 hours a day. I've never spent so much time at my computer in my life, but I coach at my computer because it's all virtual. I do all my auditions. I do all my sessions here. I'm in my recording studio right now, and I'm in here. The cool thing is my schedule's pretty much my own. Right now I have a lot of 9 a.m. sessions because so many of my clients are in Europe, and 9 a.m. for me is 4 p.m. for them. So that's like the latest they want me to work. So I'm doing a lot of 9 a.m. sessions. But aside from that, I normally don't have to set an alarm. I wake up when I want. I can go for a walk with my dog, do some yoga, ride my bike, go to the farmer's market. Maybe I'll start my day at noon or whatever. And there's no reason that I don't feel any big hurry to get stuff in or finish stuff right away. So I do mostly have a flexibility, but I'm working 5 days a week, like probably 8 hours a day. And then I try not to let it spill over on the weekends. But for instance, this Labor Day weekend, I took Labor Day off. So I took a 3-day weekend. But on Saturday, I found in my spam folder from Friday, I should check my spam more often, an ongoing big European client of mine had said, like, can you get this? We need to like redo this one part and we'll pay you half your session fee to just do like a couple sentences. And can you get it to us right away? And it was already like 24 hours in the past. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll do it for you on Sunday. Not a huge deal. I love what I do and I get paid really well. So I had to turn on my microphone for like 15 minutes to make like 300 euro or whatever. And so it was worth it. And I want the client to be happy and I don't want them stressing. But for the most part, don't work on the weekends. I don't even coach on the weekends. That's kind of a boundary I've laid down with the dojo. Is like, I would like to have weekends like a regular person. And so and I can't work evenings either, because if I look at a screen after like 8 o'clock at night, I'm not going to sleep well. So I mostly coach and work and audition between like 9 a.m. and 5 or 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what do you want to do after you self-retire? Is there anything else you want to do?
Yeah, just more of what I'm already doing, like ride my bike more, I can't wait to get back into yoga studios. I've been able to do a little bit here, but I don't really do well with the virtual yoga. And even after 30 years of being a yoga practitioner, and gosh, I guess I've been teaching for almost 20 years. I still don't have the discipline to do like an hour at home every day or every other day. I don't have the patience, and I'll do what's easy for me, where a class forces me to get out of my comfort zone and like, oh, more downward dogs. Great. I don't have the upper body strength or whatever. So I really do love yoga classes as a way to push myself to do more asana. So I would like to go to that. And I'm an adaptive yoga teacher for people with disabilities and seniors, and none of that, because those are high risk populations, none of that's been happening for a year and a half. And my seniors, bless their hearts, trying to get them on a Zoom is just not even happening. So we decided just to just pause the senior and adaptive yoga for now. So I look forward to doing more in-person, hands-on senior and adaptive yoga. I'm a certified death midwife through Sacred Crossings in Los Angeles. So I've been trained. I studied hospice through Twilight Brigade, which is no longer, I think, but it was an organization, a nonprofit, in conjunction with the Veterans Affairs at the LA Veterans Hospital. So they trained us to just basically be with veterans who had nobody to be with them at the end of their life. So I would like to do more, facing death with people, whether they're dying or their loved ones are dying. My first client turned out to be my best friend right after I finished my training. My best friend was diagnosed with breast cancer, and 3 years later she died, Mimi Moss. She actually owned Sage Vegan out in Los Angeles. So if people know the Sage restaurants out in LA, she was the founder, creator, mastermind behind Sage Vegan, and we lost her May 3 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, I'm sorry. Do you want to speak a little bit more about what that means to be a death midwife?
There's
in terms of a little bit more detail, if you want to.
Yeah, there isn't like a specific definition, because first of all, it's almost entirely women in it. There was a man in my training program. I didn't know him, but he was in the same program I was in, but before me. And then shortly after he finished his training, he died of a heart attack, like in his 50s, right after he married his husband or something. It was a bizarre story. So I know almost exclusively women in this world, and mostly senior women, mostly women who have already lost a lot of people, either their children, their partner, multiple partners. So there's different areas of focus, being with people at the end of their life, hospice, sitting, home funerals, green burial, grief counseling, anything that's like around. There isn't really a specific definition of what is a death doula or what is a death midwife. For me, my main areas of focus, a lot of people are very interested in the home viewing, having these home funerals where the body is there. I'm not interested in that. Now, I'm an Irish citizen through my parents. I'm a dual U.S.-Irish citizen. In Ireland, we love to do the wake with the dead body and the party. But everyone I talk to now, and most of my world's pretty atheist. Most of my friends and family are atheist. And we don't really have any interest in like the religious ceremonies of like having the dead body and the cleansing. And that was a lot of what I studied. And I was the only person who was like, oh, interesting. This doesn't interest me, but I'll learn it. And everyone else was just like, this is sacred. We love this process, and let's have the dead body. And I'm like, it's just a corpse. That's not who the person was. I don't even really want to see them after they're dead, because then you forever, I've seen my dead friends, and it's kind of like, oh, now I picture them, and one of the pictures I get is them being dead. But it's good to acknowledge the death by being with the dead body, but I don't think we need to make a ceremony out of it. I totally respect people wanting to do that, and I think it's great that cultures have traditions like that, but I'm interested in serving the atheist population because a lot of things around death are religious oriented. So like a non-religious take on that. I'm very interested in environment, so I love green burial. And my partner and I just bought 11 acres in Michigan of farm and forest land. And I would like to perhaps have a green cemetery in that forest one day where people can be buried without anything, maybe, naked or wrapped in cloth, or perhaps a very biodegradable pine box. But this whole incineration of the body or pickling of the body or putting them in fancy caskets is just offensive to me. And it's a ripoff. And it's a very masculine, male-dominated industry that actually goes back to the Civil War, when bodies had to be transported back to their loved ones after they died on the battlefield. And the only way to do that, it could take weeks or a month to get the body back home in the hot weather. So they started embalming them. And that wasn't a part of the Western culture, to embalm the body. And then the funeral industry discovered there was a lot of money to be made there. And they convince you that you need to be embalmed or incinerated, when really just decomposing in the earth is probably the most natural way. Plant a tree of the body. So I'm into that. I'm pretty comfortable around death and like sitting with people that are dying. I don't know that I'd make a good grief counselor, but I love that there are people offering that. So yeah, there's a lot of different routes people can take in the sort of death midwifery realm.
Well, this is fascinating because I've never even heard of this before. I am curious, when you sit with someone who's on their deathbed, if that's appropriate, what do you do for them? Do you just listen to them? Do you just sit with them? What is it? How do you serve them? Or is it depending on each person?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a matter of like listening or trying to be what they want you to be. And it seems like a lot of people are afraid of dying. A lot of people, their biggest fear around death is they just don't want to die alone. So for the Veterans Affairs, it's mostly just sitting there. If the person is awake enough or wants to play cards or chat or listen to music, but it's, basically giving the client or the, I don't make any money at this, FYI. I don't plan on it being a money-making thing. Again, much respect to the women that are making this a profession. That's great. I see it as a profession in the sense that I profess myself to it, but I don't need to make money off of it. So I would like it to be more of a volunteer service. And it's interesting that you say you haven't heard of this, because this is the way that humans died for tens of thousands of years, with their family at home in community. We buried each other. We took care of the body. And then all of that was taken from us over the past 150 years. So now, interestingly, mostly women are reclaiming that and teaching people. I'm on the board or the planning committee, steering committee of Minnesota Threshold Network, is an organization of women like myself who are of people. We do have some non-binary people, but I don't think we have any men in the group. So yeah, we find ways to serve the community, and ideally, we are teaching families how to do this for themselves so that they don't need us. We're only there because like you don't know about this because we lost this, and this is something our great-great-grandparents all over the world, this was normal. And now in the Western developed world, it's been taken from us.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I also feel like there's kind of this, for depending on who you are and where you grew up and how your family is and how your traditions are and blurb, blurb, blurb. But there's, at least for me, there is not talk about death at all, right? It's a very taboo subject, actually. So yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm mostly, I am a white Irish American woman, so that's my main exposure. But I did live in Africa. I have a little orchard in Ecuador, and I learned Spanish, and I'm a little bit more woven into the Latin culture now, and I see that perspective. And yeah, they sure know how to party around death and face it, and it's woven into the fabric of their culture. They are not a death-phobic culture, and in some ways that makes them healthier, mentally healthier than what I would call like Western or Northern Hemisphere, or the highly developed Eurocentric world or whatever. Is just, and we weren't always either. It's not just like a white-brown thing either. Like obviously white culture or European culture used to have death woven into the fabric of their culture, and it used to be talked about, and now it's just, we're very materialistic and very capitalistic, and so we're very death phobic and very much in death denial.
We're coming up on time. So just real quick, if you want to share if anyone's more interested in connecting with you about your death midwifery, or even just to follow you as a voiceover artist that you are, or get coaching from you with the business side of voiceover, how do we connect with you? Yeah. And is there anything else that you would like to promote before we say goodbye?
Oh, thank you. Sure. Yeah, I'll just kind of tell you like where you can find these things. So I am CatherineCampion.com, CatherineCampion. If you have questions about any of this, please shoot me a message and reach out to me. You can look up the VODojo.com is my primary school of training of voiceover and where I coach voiceover and offer workshops and seminars. They're based in Los Angeles, but we are now fully virtual. I think at some point there will be opportunities again to be in person. You could just Google Death Midwifery or look up the Minnesota Threshold Network. If you're in LA and you're interested to learn more, you can look up Sacred Crossings, which is a death midwifery training program in the Los Angeles area. I guess that's all. Yeah, I don't do I've never looked at Instagram. I've never tweeted. I like LinkedIn. So, if other working people want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find me there. But you can just find my website and check out what I've done and send me a message there.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening to the Actors Resource Podcast with me, Aaliyah Lay. I would love to hear from you, so email me, AliyahKLei@gmail.com, ALYAKLEI@gmail.com.